The rooftop brunch at Skyline was my sister Mia's idea. Come on, Zara. She'd insisted over the phone. We haven't had a family get-together in ages. I should have recognized the unusual enthusiasm in her voice as a warning sign. But after 3 years of carefully constructed distance from my family, guilt had finally won out. That's how I found myself seated at a corner table on the 30th floor of downtown's trendiest restaurant, nursing an overpriced mimosa while watching my family's familiar dynamic unfold. My mother was complaining about her book club. My father was scrolling through his phone, half listening. My younger brother Aiden was regaling everyone with tales from his latest failed startup attempt. And Mia, perfectly put together as always in her designer dress and immaculate makeup, was watching. Me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. So Zara, she said during a lull in the conversation, her voice carrying that honeyed tone she used when she wanted something. How's the museum job going? Still cataloging ancient artifacts in that dusty basement? I took a careful sip of my drink. The conservation department isn't in the basement, Mia. And yes, it's going well. That wasn't a lie. My job as an assistant conservator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was fulfilling, if modest in salary. What my family didn't know, what I'd carefully concealed from them for years, was that it was just one part of my life. The other part involved the algorithmic trading system I'd developed in graduate school, which had turned my initial investment of $50,000 into well over $8 million over the past 7 years. Must be tough making ends meet in the city. On a non-profit salary, Mia continued, eyebrows raised, especially with those student loans. I shrugged. I manage. My father looked up from his phone. You know, there's still a position at the firm if you're interested, Zara. Something with actual growth potential. Before I could respond with my usual polite refusal, Mia let out a laugh that immediately set my nerves on edge. Oh my God, Dad. Zara doesn't need your charity job. She turned to me, eyes gleaming. Should we tell them, or do you want to? The table went quiet. My heart rate doubled as I stared at my sister. Tell them what? Mia's smile widened. About your little side project? The one that's made you millions while you pretend to be scraping by? The mimosa in my stomach curdled instantly. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. Aiden's mouth fell open. My father's eyes narrowed in confusion. What are you talking about? My mother asked, looking between us. Our Zara here, Mia said, gesturing toward me with her champagne flute, is secretly loaded, like multi-millionaire loaded. She developed some fancy trading algorithm that makes money while she plays with old pottery all day. Isn't that right, sis? I felt the blood drain from my face. How did you... Your investment manager is dating my friend Claire, Mia explained, looking triumphant. Small world, right? He mentioned his brilliant client who works at a museum but has built this incredible portfolio. Claire showed me your picture from the firm's client appreciation dinner, the one you told us was a work event. 4 pairs of eyes fixed on me with expressions ranging from shock to budding calculation. The careful separation I'd maintained between my financial life and my family was collapsing in real time over brunch mimosas and overpriced avocado toast. Is this true? My father demanded, fully attentive now. You've been hiding this from us. I took a deep breath, mind racing. There was no point denying it. Yes, I've had some success with an investment algorithm I developed. It wasn't relevant to our family discussions. Not relevant? My mother's voice rose an octave. Zara, we're your family. How could you keep something like this secret? Aiden was already pulling out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. What's the name of your system? Is there an app? Can other people invest in it? I ignored him, focusing instead on Mia, whose satisfied smirk made my blood boil. Why would you do this? I asked quietly. She shrugged, taking a delicate bite of her eggs Benedict. Family shouldn't have secrets, Zara, especially not when some of us are struggling while others are sitting on a fortune. And there it was, the real reason for this ambush. Mia needed money, and she'd decided that exposing my financial situation was the fastest route to accessing it. Struggling? I repeated. Last I checked, you and Eric just bought a vacation. Home in the Hamptons. A flash of something, anger, panic, crossed her face before she composed herself. Things change. The point is, you've been living this double life while watching the rest of us stress about money. It's selfish. My father was still processing, his expression shifting from shock to something more calculating. How much are we talking? About here exactly? I stood up abruptly, dropping my napkin onto the table. I'm not doing this. Not here. Not like this. Zara, wait, my mother began, but I was already walking away, heart hammering in my chest. Behind me, I heard Mia's voice. Drama queen. Always has to make everything about herself. I made it to the elevator before the tears started. Hot and furious. 7 years of careful privacy, undone in an instant by the sister who had always seen me as competition rather than family. As the elevator descended 30 floors, I tried to steady my breathing and assess the damage. My family knew about my money now, and if I understood anything about my family dynamics, I knew exactly what would come next. The requests, the expectations, the guilt trips, the subtle and not so subtle suggestions about how I should be spending my fortune. My phone buzzed with a text from Aiden. We need to talk. ASAP. And so it begins, I thought grimly. I spent the next 3 days ignoring calls and texts from my family. Instead, I threw myself into work at the museum, finding comfort in the careful, methodical process of preserving history. There was something soothing about focusing on artifacts that had survived centuries. It gave me perspective on my own temporary crisis. On Wednesday evening, I was cataloging a collection of ancient Roman glass when my boss, Eleanor, poked her. Head into the conservation lab. There's someone here to see you, she said, frowning slightly. Says she's your sister and it's urgent. I closed my eyes briefly. Tall, perfect hair. Looks like she walked off a magazine cover. That's the one? Want me to tell her you're in the middle of something delicate? I was tempted, but I knew Mia well enough to know she wouldn't give up easily. No, it's fine. I'll see her in the lobby. Mia was examining a display case of ancient jewelry when I approached, looking incongruously glamorous among the museum's afternoon visitors in their comfortable shoes and casual clothes. She turned as I approached, her expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. You've been avoiding us, she said without preamble. Can you blame me? I gestured toward the museum cafe. Let's sit down. Once we were seated with 2 cups of mediocre coffee between us, I fixed her with a level stare. What do you want, Mia? She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. First, I want to apologize for how things went down at brunch. I could have handled it better. You could have not handled it at all, I pointed out. It wasn't your information to share. She waved a dismissive hand. They were going to find out eventually. You can't keep something like that secret forever. I managed for 7 years. And why is that exactly? She leaned forward, her perfect eyebrows drawing together. What kind of person hides their success from their own family? It's weird. Zara, it makes people wonder what else you're hiding. I laughed humorlessly. Maybe I hid it because I knew exactly how everyone would react. Dad would want to control it. Mom would brag about it to her friends while simultaneously criticizing. How I manage it, and you... I met her eyes directly. You would find a way to make it about you. A flash of anger crossed her face before she smoothed it away. That's not fair. We're family. We're supposed to help each other. Is that why you're here? To ask for help? She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. Actually, yes. Eric's business is going through a rough patch. We've had to take out some loans, and the interest is killing us. We're at risk of losing the Hamptons house. I waited, saying nothing. We need about $200,000 to get things stabilized, she continued, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality. Just until the business recovers. It's a loan, not a gift. We'd pay you back, with interest. I studied my sister, the woman who had just betrayed my privacy in the most public way possible, who was now sitting across from me asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars as if it were the most natural thing in the world. No, I said simply. Mia blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct refusal. Excuse me. I said, no, I'm not giving you money. Her mask of composure slipped, revealing the anger beneath. Are you serious right now? You're sitting on millions and you won't help your own sister? You exposed my private financial information to our entire family without my consent, I reminded her. And now you want me to reward that behavior with a $200,000 loan that we both know would never be repaid? No, Mia. She stood up abruptly, drawing glances from nearby tables. This is unbelievable. You've always been selfish, but this, she gestured wildly, this is a whole new level. You're going to let us lose our home when you could help with money you'd never even miss. I remained seated, keeping my voice steady. The Hamptons house is your second home, Mia, and your financial problems aren't my responsibility to solve. Mom and Dad were right about you, she hissed. All that potential, wasted on someone who doesn't care about anyone but herself. She snatched up her designer handbag. This isn't over, Zara. I watched her storm out of the cafe, attracting curious stares from tourists and museum goers. Despite the public nature of our confrontation, I felt oddly calm. For years, I'd feared this exact scenario. Being discovered, being asked for money, having to say no. Now that it had happened, I found it wasn't nearly as devastating as I'd imagined. I finished my coffee slowly, thinking about Mia's parting words. This isn't over. She was right about that, at least. This was just the beginning. The following weekend, my parents invited me to dinner at their house in New Jersey. I considered declining, but ultimately decided it was better to face them directly than to let the situation fester. Besides, I was curious about what approach they would take. Would they be angry like Mia, or would they try a different tactic? My childhood home looked the same as always. A comfortable colonial in an upper-middle-class neighborhood, well-maintained but showing its age in small ways. My father had done well as a corporate attorney, providing us with a privileged upbringing, though he'd always made it clear that his financial support came with strings attached. Control in our family was currency. My mother answered the door with a too bright smile. Zara, so good to see you. Her hug lasted a beat too long. Your father's in his study. Dinner's almost ready. I found my father seated behind his massive oak desk, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed some document. He looked up when I entered, removing his glasses with deliberate slowness. Zara, have a seat. I sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk, feeling like I was 16 again, being called in to explain a disappointing grade. I've been doing some research, he began, tapping a folder on his desk, about algorithmic trading systems and the kind of returns they can generate. Impressive stuff. I said nothing, waiting. What I can't figure out, he continued, is why my daughter, who I put through one of the best universities in the country, would choose to hide her success from her family. Care to explain that? The implicit claim of ownership. His investment, in my education, therefore some claim on my success, wasn't subtle. I didn't hide my success, I replied carefully. I kept my financial situation private. There's a difference. Private from your family? He leaned forward. The people who raised you, supported you, believed in you even when you chose that impractical art history degree over business or law? I felt a familiar tension headache beginning to form. My financial situation is my business, Dad. It doesn't affect you. Doesn't affect... He cut himself off, visibly controlling his temper. Zara, we're your parents. Your success is our success. Your resources are family resources. And there it was, the core belief that I'd known would surface eventually. The idea that my money wasn't really mine at all, but a family asset that should be managed collectively, which, in our family, meant managed by him. That's not how I see it, I said quietly. His expression hardened. No? Then how do you explain turning down your sister when she came to you for help? $200,000 is nothing to someone in your position. It's not about the amount, I explained. It's about boundaries. Mia betrayed my trust, then immediately asked for money. That's not a healthy dynamic. Boundaries? He practically spat the word. She's your sister, for God's sake. Family helps family. That's how it works. Family respects each other, I countered. Family doesn't ambush each other at brunch to expose private information. My mother appeared in the doorway, her smile strained. Dinner's ready. Let's continue this conversation at the table, shall we? The dining room was set with the good china, a clear sign that this dinner was considered a special occasion. I took my usual seat, noting that Aiden's place was empty. Aiden couldn't make it? I asked as my mother served the roast chicken. He's meeting with potential investors, my father replied. For his new app idea. I nodded, unsurprised. Aiden had cycled through startup ideas like most people change socks, each one requiring significant seed money that inevitably disappeared into the ether with nothing to show for it. We ate in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before my mother spoke. Zara, honey, we're not trying to make you feel bad. We're just surprised and a little hurt that you didn't share such an important part of your life with us. Her tone was gentler than my father's, but the underlying message was the same. I had wronged them by keeping my financial success private. I understand that, I said, softening my voice, but try to see it from my perspective. My algorithm started as a graduate school project. When it began to succeed, I was surprised and excited, but also cautious. I wanted to make sure it wasn't just a fluke before I told anyone. And after 7 years, my father interjected. Still a fluke? I sighed. By then, I'd gotten used to keeping my financial life separate from my personal life. It simplified things. Simplified things how? My mother pressed. What were you afraid would happen? I looked between them, weighing honesty against diplomacy. I was afraid that instead of seeing me, my work, my interests, my choices, people would only see the money. That relationships would become transactional. I set down my fork. And based on what's happened since Mia's revelation, those fears weren't unfounded. My father's face flushed. That's unfair. We're not after your money, Zara. Aren't you? I challenged gently. In the past week, Mia has asked me for $200,000, and you're upset that I refused. That feels pretty transactional to me. My mother reached across the table to touch my hand. We just want what's best. For the family as a whole, Mia and Eric are in trouble, and you're in a position to help. That's all. And what about what's best for me? I asked. What about respecting my autonomy and my right to manage my own resources? My father set down his glass with more force than necessary. This isn't just about you, Zara. It never has. Bin, family means collective responsibility. It means stepping up when others need you. I agree, I said, surprising him. But it's a two-way street. It also means respecting boundaries and not feeling entitled to resources you didn't earn. The conversation circled like this throughout dinner, neither side willing to concede. By the time I left, it was clear that we had reached an impasse. They saw my refusal to help Mia as selfish and cold. I saw their expectations as presumptuous and disrespectful. As I drove back to the city, I realized that my carefully constructed separation between my financial life and my family had been more than just a practical decision. It had been a form of self-protection. I had always known, on some level, that money would change how my family saw me and what they expected from me. Now that barrier was gone, and I would have to find new ways to protect myself while navigating these turbulent waters. The following Wednesday, I was finishing up an inventory of recently acquired artifacts when my phone lit up with a text from Aiden. Coffee tomorrow? Just you and me. No drama, promise. I hesitated. Of my family members, Aiden had always been the least judgmental, the most willing to live and let live. But he also had a history of financial irresponsibility and grand schemes that inevitably required bailouts. Still, I was curious about his take on the situation. Sure, I texted back. 1 p.m. at Bluebird Cafe. Aiden arrived 15 minutes late, as was his habit, looking like he'd just rolled out of bed despite the afternoon hour. At 29, my brother still had the disheveled charm of a college student, complete with perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and an endless supply of startup-branded hoodies. Thanks for meeting me, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. I've been trying to stay out of the family drama, but... He trailed off, shrugging. But it's hard to avoid. I finished for him. Exactly. He ordered an elaborate coffee, drink, then turned back to me. So, secret millionaire, huh? Gotta say, sis, I didn't see that coming. I smiled despite myself. That was kind of the point. Fair enough. He studied me thoughtfully. You know, I get it. Why you kept it quiet. The second Mia and Dad found out, it became about them. What you could do for them, not about what you accomplished. I blinked, surprised by his insight. Yes, exactly that. He nodded, accepting his elaborate coffee creation from the barista with a wink. For what it's worth, I think it's badass. You built something valuable while everyone was underestimating you. Classic Zara move. I felt myself relaxing, slightly. Thanks, Aiden. That actually means a lot. He took a sip of his drink, leaving a foam mustache that he wiped away with the back of his hand. So listen, I wanted to talk to you about this new project I'm working on. It's not like the others, I swear. This one's got serious potential. And there it was. I kept my expression neutral. Tell me about it. He launched into an enthusiastic explanation of an app that would somehow revolutionize how people found dog walkers, complete with blockchain integration and AI matching algorithms. As he spoke, his eyes took on the familiar gleam of someone picturing imminent millions. I'd seen it before, many times, which is why this round of seed funding is so critical, he was saying. We need enough runway to build the MVP and start acquiring users before we go for a proper Series A. I waited, knowing what was coming next. I know this is awkward timing with everything that's happened, he continued, having the grace to look slightly embarrassed. But I was hoping you might consider investing. Just a small stake, say 300,000, you'd get preferred. Shares, of course, and first right of refusal for the next round. I took a slow sip of my tea, studying my brother. Unlike Mia's angry demands or my parents' guilt-laden expectations, Aiden's approach was almost refreshingly straightforward. He wasn't pretending this was about anything other than money. Aiden, I said gently, how many startups have you launched in the past 5 years? He shifted uncomfortably. 4 or 5, but 7, I corrected. And how many of them are still operating? That's not really a fair metric. Most startups fail. That's just the nature of... None of them are still operating, I continued, and each one was funded primarily by family money. Dad's retirement account, Mom's inheritance from Grandma, Mia's wedding fund before she married, Eric. He had the decency to look slightly ashamed. I know my track record isn't great, but I've learned from those failures. This time is different. It always is, I said, not unkindly. But here's the thing, Aiden. I didn't build my wealth by making emotional investments. I built it by being disciplined, methodical, and objective. So that's a no? His disappointment was evident. That's a no, I confirmed. But not because I don't believe in you. It's because mixing family and business rarely ends well. I've seen what happens when your ventures don't pan out. The blame, the resentment, the awkward holiday dinners. I value our relationship too much to risk that. He was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then he sighed. Can't blame a guy for trying. For what it's worth, I think you're handling all this family pressure pretty well. I'd have cracked by now. I smiled slightly. It hasn't been easy. Mia's on the warpath, you know, he warned, lowering his voice. She and Eric are in deeper financial trouble than they're letting on. The Hamptons house is just the tip of the iceberg. This didn't surprise me, but hearing it confirmed was still concerning. How bad is it? Aiden shrugged. Bad enough that they've been hitting up everyone in the family. Dad already gave them $100,000 from his retirement account. Didn't tell Mom. I winced. Our father, who had lectured us endlessly about financial responsibility, had dipped into his retirement to bail out Mia and Eric. It was so predictable it was almost painful. Thanks for the heads up, I said, gathering my things. And Aiden, for what it's worth, I hope your app succeeds. Just not with my money. He grinned. Fair enough. And hey, when they eventually wear you down and you start giving out family loans, remember? I asked nicely. I laughed, despite everything. I'll keep that in mind. As I walked back to the museum, I reflected on how differently my 3 family members had approached the situation. Mia with angry entitlement, my parents with guilt and obligation, and Aiden with his straightforward attempt at securing investment. 3 different strategies, all aimed at the same goal: access to my money. The question now was how long I could maintain my boundaries in the face of escalating pressure and what I would lose in the process. The museum's annual gala was one of my favorite events of the year. As a junior conservator, I usually worked behind the scenes, helping prepare exhibits and ensuring the displayed artifacts were properly protected. This year, however, I'd been invited to attend as a guest in recognition of my work on a particularly challenging restoration project. I was discussing the delicate process of preserving ancient textiles with a major donor when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I was startled to find Mia standing there in a designer gown, champagne flute in hand. "Surprise!" she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Mia, what are you doing here?" I glanced around, spotting Eric across the room, chatting with one of the museum board members. "We're patrons of the arts now," she said breezily. Eric made a donation. Last-minute tickets. Thought it would be fun to see you in your natural habitat. I excused myself from the donor and led Mia to a quieter corner of the gallery. You hate museums, I pointed out. You complained through our entire school trip to the Smithsonian. She shrugged, the movement elegant in her couture gown. People change. Besides, this is a much better class of event than I expected. Some very interesting people here. I followed her gaze to where Eric was now deep in conversation with the museum's director. What's going on, Mia? Why are you really here? Her expression hardened slightly. Maybe I wanted to see what my sister values more than her family's well-being. All these dusty old things. This is what you choose over helping us? Don't start this here, I warned quietly. This is my workplace. Oh, I'm well aware, she replied, her voice honeyed but with an edge. Your precious job. The one that pays, what, $70,000 a year? While you sit on millions. It's all very humble and noble of you, Zara. I took a deep breath, refusing to be provoked. What do you want, Mia? I want my sister back, she said, surprising me with what sounded like genuine emotion. The one who used to care about her family, the one who would have helped without making everyone beg. I do care, I said quietly, but caring doesn't mean bankrolling Eric's failing. Business or enabling your lifestyle choices. Her eyes flashed. You have no idea what our situation is like. You sit in your perfect little world, judging us, while we're fighting to keep everything from falling apart. Then tell me, I challenged. Be honest about what's really going on, instead of just demanding money. For a moment, I thought she might actually open up. I saw vulnerability flicker across her face. Then Eric appeared at her side, placing a proprietary hand at the small of her back. There you are, he said, nodding briefly to me before focusing on Mia. I've been talking with Douglas Chen. He's very interested in our situation. I think he might be willing to help. Douglas Chen was the museum's most generous benefactor, a tech billionaire with a passion for ancient cultures. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. What did you tell him? I asked sharply. Eric looked at me with barely concealed dislike. The truth, that we're facing some financial challenges and exploring options. He seemed very sympathetic. I closed my eyes briefly, understanding dawning. You came here to network, to find someone who might give you money since I wouldn't. We came here to explore all avenues, Eric corrected smoothly. Since family support wasn't forthcoming, the calculated nature of their appearance at my workplace, using my connections, potentially embarrassing me professionally, felt like a new low. I need to get back to my guests, I said coldly. Enjoy the gala. I walked away, heart pounding with anger and hurt. Throughout the rest of the evening, I watched as Mia and Eric worked the room, moving from one wealthy patron to another. Several times I saw them gesturing in my direction, no doubt weaving some story about family discord and financial hardship. By the time the gala ended, I was exhausted and furious. As the last guest departed, I found myself alone in the Egyptian wing, staring at a glass case containing funerary items from a tomb dating back thousands of years. Tough night? A voice behind me made me turn. It was Eleanor, my boss, still elegant in her black gown despite the late hour. You could say that, I replied, attempting a smile. She moved to stand beside me, looking at the ancient artifacts. Family is complicated, especially when money enters the equation. I glanced at her, surprised. You noticed? Hard not to, she said dryly. Your sister isn't exactly subtle. Neither is her husband, I groaned. I'm so sorry if they made a scene or said anything inappropriate. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. Nothing we haven't seen before. The wealthy donor world is full of family drama. She gave me a sidelong look. For what it's worth, Douglas Chen wasn't impressed by their pitch. He asked me about them afterward. What did you say? That I didn't know the details of your family situation, but that you're one of the most dedicated, ethical people I know. She smiled slightly. I think he was more interested in your work on the Mesopotamian tablets than in whatever tale they were spinning. Relief washed over me. Thank you, she nodded toward the exit. Go home, Zara. Get some rest. And remember, the artifacts in this museum have survived wars, natural disasters, and thousands of years of human folly. Your current troubles will pass too. As I left the museum, Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. The perspective helped, but it didn't erase the bitter taste of Mia and Eric's ambush. They had crossed a line by bringing their financial demands into my professional space, and I knew it wouldn't be the last boundary they attempted to breach. The war for my money, and by extension, my autonomy, was escalating. 2 weeks after the gala incident, I received a formal-looking envelope in the mail. Inside was an invitation to a family financial summit at my parents' house, complete with an agenda listing topics like family investment pool and collective asset management. I stared at it in disbelief. They were treating my money like a corporate resource to be allocated by committee. It was so presumptuous, so typically my father, that I almost laughed. Almost. I called my mother, hoping for some clarification. "Oh, that was your father's idea," she explained, sounding slightly embarrassed. "He thought a more structured approach might help resolve the tension. You know how he is. Everything has to be organized like a business meeting." "Mom," I said carefully, "you understand how inappropriate this is, right? You're essentially asking me to submit my personal finances to family oversight," she sighed. "I know it seems that way, but he's just trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Mia and Eric's situation is getting worse. They've had to list the Hamptons house, and they're behind on their mortgage for the main house too." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and part of me genuinely was. "But their financial problems aren't my responsibility to solve." "We're not saying they are," my mother insisted, "but surely there's some middle ground, some way you could help without feeling taken advantage of." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tension headache building. "The problem isn't the money itself, Mom. It's the entitlement. It's the assumption that because I have resources, the family has some claim to them. It's Mia ambushing me at my workplace. It's Dad treating my personal finances like a family business to be managed collectively. We're just trying to understand," she said, her voice small. "Before all this, you were always the helpful one, the responsible one. We never thought you'd turn your back when the family needed you. The guilt trip was so predictable it almost felt scripted." "I haven't turned my back on anyone," I said firmly, "but I won't be manipulated or guilted into financial decisions I'm not comfortable with." After a moment of silence, she asked, "So you won't come to the meeting?" "No, Mom, I won't be coming to the meeting." I hung up feeling drained but resolute. The Family Financial Summit was a transparent attempt to legitimize their claims on my money, to make me feel selfish for maintaining boundaries. I wouldn't give it credibility by attending. Instead, I called my financial advisor and scheduled a meeting. It was time to ensure my assets were properly protected, not just from market volatility, but from family pressure as well. 3 days later, I sat across from Marcus, the investment manager who had helped me navigate my unexpected wealth from the beginning. "I need to make some changes," I explained after bringing him up to speed on recent events. "I need structures in place that will make it harder for family members to access my assets, even if I were to waver in a moment of guilt or emotional vulnerability." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "There are several approaches we could take. Irrevocable trusts, certain types of LLCs, multi-signature requirements for large withdrawals. We can create a system that requires deliberation and outside approval for major financial decisions." "That sounds exactly like what I need," I said, relief washing over me. As we discussed the details, I felt a weight lifting. For the first time since Mia's revelation at brunch, I felt like I was regaining control of the situation. I couldn't stop my family from asking for money, but I could create structures that would make it harder for me to give in to emotional pressure. "One more thing," I said as our meeting was wrapping up. "I'd like to set up a separate, smaller account, something completely disconnected from my main holdings, a fund that I can use for family requests that I genuinely want to support, without opening the door to my broader assets." Marcus smiled. "A boundary fund? Smart thinking. We can set that up with very specific parameters." By the time I left his office, we had outlined a comprehensive plan, one that would protect my assets while still allowing me the flexibility to help family members in ways I deemed appropriate. It wasn't about hoarding wealth, it was about maintaining autonomy over resources I had built through my own innovation and discipline. On the day of the Family Financial Summit that I had declined to attend, I instead signed the paperwork establishing the new structures Marcus and I had designed. It felt symbolic somehow, a declaration of independence from the financial enmeshment my family seemed determined to create. That evening, my phone exploded with messages. My father's were terse and disappointed. "Your absence today spoke volumes. We proceeded without you." My mother's were guilt-laden. "Everyone was so hurt that you wouldn't even discuss options. Is money really more important than family harmony?" Aiden's was characteristically direct. "You dodged a bullet. Dad had spreadsheets with your name on them. Scary stuff." And Mia's message was the most surprising. "Congratulations! You've made your point. The family will stop asking for handouts. Hope isolation suits you." I set my phone aside, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Guilt, yes, but also relief and a growing sense of peace with my decisions. The road ahead would be difficult, navigating family relationships strained by financial expectations. But for the first time since that fateful brunch, I felt confident in my course. My money wasn't the problem. It never had been. The problem was the assumption that success should be communal, while the work to achieve it remained individual. That was a dynamic I would not accept, no matter how much guilt or anger came my way. 3 months passed with minimal contact from my family. The occasional text message from my mother, checking in but clearly walking on eggshells. A birthday card from my father, formal and distant. Nothing from Mia. Only Aiden maintained something close to normal communication, sending memes and occasional updates about his latest venture. The dog walker app had already been abandoned in favor of a cryptocurrency concept. I threw myself into my work at the museum, finding comfort in the methodical tasks of preservation and cataloging. There was something soothing about working with objects that had survived centuries, a reminder that current troubles were temporary in the grand scheme of things. On a crisp autumn afternoon, I was examining a newly acquired collection of ancient coins when Eleanor appeared at my workstation. "You have a visitor," she said, her expression unreadable. "Your sister. She's in the lobby." I tensed immediately. "Mia, did she say what she wants?" "Just that it's important, and she needs to speak with you in person." Eleanor hesitated. "She looks different, not like she did at the gala." Curiosity overrode my wariness. "I'll go see her." I found Mia sitting on a bench in the lobby, and Eleanor was right. She looked dramatically different from the polished, confident woman who had ambushed me at the gala. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a plain sweater. She stood when she saw me, visibly nervous. "Thanks for coming down. I wasn't sure you would." "What's going on, Mia?" I asked, maintaining a cautious distance. "Can we go somewhere to talk? Privately?" I hesitated, then nodded toward the museum cafe, which was nearly empty this late in the afternoon. Once we were seated with cups of tea between us, Mia took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology," she began, her voice wavering slightly. A real one, not the half-assed version I gave you before. I waited, unwilling to make this easy for her. What I did, exposing your financial situation at brunch, ambushing you at the gala, all of it was wrong. I violated your privacy. I tried to manipulate you. And when that didn't work, I tried to punish you." She looked down at her hands. "I was desperate and entitled and frankly jealous." "Jealous?" I repeated, surprised. She nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "You've always been the smart one, the responsible one, but I was supposed to be the successful one, the one who married well and had the perfect life. Finding out that you had quietly built this fortune while I was..." She trailed off. "While you were what?" I prompted. She finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "While I was drowning in debt, trying to maintain an image that was killing us financially. The Hamptons house, the cars, the clothes, none of it was sustainable. Eric's business has been failing for years, but we kept up appearances, borrowing more and more to maintain the lifestyle everyone expected from us. I absorbed this, saying nothing. We lost everything, Zara," she continued quietly. "The Hamptons house was foreclosed on. We had to sell the Manhattan apartment. We're living in a rental in New Jersey now, near Mom and Dad. Eric's looking for a regular job for the first time in a decade. I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in my sister's downfall. She gave a small, bitter laugh. The irony is, if I had just been honest with you from the beginning, if I had explained our situation and asked for help creating a sustainable plan instead of demanding a bailout, you probably would have helped in some way. Probably, I agreed, but not by throwing money at the problem. She nodded. I know that now, but at the time, all I could see was that you had what I needed and you were refusing to share it. It made me crazy with resentment. We sat in silence. For a moment, the years of competition and misunderstanding between us almost tangible in the quiet cafe. So, what happens now? I finally asked. Mia took a deep breath. Now I try to rebuild my life without the false image, without the constant financial stress of maintaining appearances. Eric and I are in counseling. I'm looking for work. Real work. Not the charity board positions I used to fill my time with. And you're telling me this because I miss my sister, she said simply. Because I want to try to repair the damage I've done. Not for money. I swear to you, I'm not here to ask for anything. But because losing you has been the worst part of this whole mess. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. Instead, I saw only exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine remorse. It won't be easy, I warned. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. I know, she said quietly, but I'd like to try, if you're willing. I considered this. Part of me was still angry, still hurt by her betrayal and the subsequent months of family pressure. But another part, perhaps the wiser part, recognized that holding on to that anger served no purpose. I'm willing to try, I said finally. Slowly, on neutral ground at first. Relief washed over her face. That's more than I hoped for, honestly. As we finished our tea, Mia filled me in on other family news. Our parents were struggling to accept the new reality. Both their daughters' situations had reversed dramatically, and neither fit neatly into the roles they had assigned us. Aiden was Aiden, perpetually optimistic despite continuous setbacks, and Mia herself was learning to live within her means for the first time in her adult life. It's humbling, she admitted as we walked toward the museum exit, but also kind of freeing. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending maintaining an image that wasn't real. I nodded, understanding that particular freedom all too well. Sometimes the masks we wear become prisons. At the door, she hesitated. Would it be weird if I asked to see some of your work someday? I've never really understood what you do here, beyond the vague museum stuff description. The request surprised me. Mia had never shown interest in my professional life before. Not weird at all. I'd like that. As I watched her walk away, I felt a cautious hope. The relationship wasn't healed, not by a long shot, but perhaps this crisis, painful as it had been, had created an opportunity for something more authentic, to grow in its place. The holidays approached, bringing with them the inevitable question of family gatherings. After much consideration, I decided to accept my parents' invitation for Christmas dinner, the first time we would all be together since the disastrous brunch that had started everything. I arrived at their house with carefully chosen gifts and a sense of cautious optimism. The past months had been difficult, but they had also been clarifying. I knew myself better now. My boundaries, my values, what I was and wasn't willing to compromise on. Whatever happened tonight, I would remain. Centered in that knowledge, my father answered the door, looking older somehow. Zara, thank you for coming. His handshake was formal, but not cold. Inside, the house was decorated as elaborately as ever, but there was a subdued quality to the gathering. My mother embraced me warmly, whispering, "We've missed you so much," in my ear. Aiden was sprawled on the couch, already helping himself to the eggnog, and Mia and Eric sat somewhat awkwardly by the tree, dressed in noticeably less expensive clothes than they would have worn a year ago. Throughout dinner, conversation remained polite but stilted. We carefully navigated around the topics of money, careers, and the events of the past months. Instead, we discussed safe subjects, a book my mother was reading for her club, a documentary Aiden had recently watched, the unseasonably warm weather. It was my father who finally broke the unspoken embargo on difficult topics. As we were finishing dessert, he cleared his throat and said, "I think we've all been avoiding the elephant in the room. Perhaps it's time we addressed it directly." My mother looked alarmed. Richard, is this really the time? If not now, when? He countered. We're all here. It's a family holiday. Seems as good a time as any to clear the air. I set down my fork, bracing myself. What would you like to address, Dad? He looked at me directly, his expression serious. I owe you an apology, Zara. We all do, but perhaps me most of all. This was not what I had expected. I waited, saying nothing. When we learned about your financial success, I reacted poorly, he continued. Instead of simply being proud of what you had accomplished, I immediately began thinking about how your resources could solve family problems. I treated your achievement as a family asset rather than respecting it as the result of your individual work and intelligence. My mother reached over to squeeze his hand encouragingly. The Family Financial Summit was particularly inappropriate, he admitted. It reflected my professional background, addressing everything as a business problem to be solved with proper structure and oversight. But your finances aren't a corporate resource to be allocated by committee. They're the fruits of your innovation and discipline. I felt a tightness in my throat. Thank you for saying that. I want you to know, he continued, that I've come to respect your boundaries. We all have. Your money is yours to manage as you see fit. No more pressure, no more expectations. Around the table, my mother, Mia, and even Aiden nodded in agreement. The past few months have been educational for all of us, my mother added gently. Mia and Eric's situation, your standoff with the family, it forced us to examine some unhealthy patterns. Mia spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. We've been having some hard conversations about money and responsibility, about the difference between helping and enabling, about being honest when we're struggling instead of keeping up appearances. I looked around the table, taking in their expressions. My father's uncharacteristic humility, my mother's gentle hope, Mia's hard-won wisdom, Aiden's thoughtful attention. Something had shifted in the family dynamic, something fundamental. I appreciate hearing all of this, I said carefully. And I want to clarify something. It was never about not wanting to help family. It was about the assumption that my resources were communal property and about the methods used to try to access them. My father nodded. We understand that now. Thoughtful silence fell over the table. Then Aiden, always the one to break tension, raised his glass. To Zara for standing her ground and teaching this family some valuable lessons about boundaries. And to all of us for eventually being smart enough to learn them. We clinked glasses, the mood lightening. As conversation moved to other topics, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The family dynamic had been fundamentally altered, perhaps permanently, but not necessarily for the worse. In place of unspoken expectations and assumed roles, we were building something more honest, more respectful. Later, as we gathered around the tree to exchange gifts, Mia handed me a small, simply wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph I hadn't seen in years. The two of us as children, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning widely at the camera. I found it when we were packing up the apartment, she explained. Made me remember when things were simpler between us. I studied the photograph, feeling a complex mixture of nostalgia and hope. Thank you, Mia. It's perfect. As the evening wound down, I found myself alone with my father in the kitchen, helping to put away the last of the dishes. You know, he said, closing a cabinet. I've spent my whole life believing that financial success was the ultimate measure of a person's worth. It's why I pushed all of you so hard in that direction. I nodded, familiar with his philosophy. But watching how you've handled all of this, the grace, the firmness, the clarity of purpose, I've realized something. He turned to face me fully. Character is worth more than money. And you, Zara, have shown extraordinary character throughout this ordeal. Coming from my achievement-oriented father, this was perhaps the highest compliment he could offer. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past months. My sister had outed me as a millionaire, setting off a chain reaction that had threatened to destroy family relationships and compromise my autonomy. But in the crucible of that crisis, something valuable had emerged, a clearer understanding of my own boundaries and a more honest foundation for family relationships moving forward. My wealth was still my own, to manage and share as I saw fit. But it no longer stood as a barrier between me and my family. Instead, it had become the catalyst for a necessary transformation. Painful, yes, but ultimately healing. Some might see it as a story about money, about the complications that arise when financial success enters family dynamics. But I knew it was really a story about boundaries, about the courage to define them and the strength to maintain them, even when doing so is difficult and painful. In the end, that clarity was worth more than any amount in my bank accounts. And for the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt truly wealthy in the ways that mattered most. What would you have done in this situation? Tell me in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. And if you love real-life stories filled with emotion, betrayal, and shocking twists, don't forget to subscribe to Revengealina. Every story here will touch your heart or break it.